As a young child, I recall evening after evening my father's diligence and compassion as he applied himself to...
The announcement was not about the crown, a cancelled engagement, or another palace dispute. It was about a child. Just minutes ago, Prince William and Catherine confirmed that Prince Louis had struggled emotionally while watching his mother face cancer treatment. Behind the public smiles and playful moments was a young boy trying to understand why his mother was tired, why plans kept changing, and why adults lowered their voices whenever her health was mentioned. William stood beside Catherine not as the heir to the throne, but as a father. Catherine spoke not as a future queen, but as a mother who had realized that silence was no longer protecting her youngest son. Louis had not collapsed in tears. He had not demanded answers. The first warning was quieter than that, and far more painful. It came through one simple question that stopped both parents completely. What Louis asked revealed that he had understood more than anyone believed, and feared something neither William nor Catherine had been ready to hear. But that question was only the beginning. Behind the palace's closed doors, to the public, Prince Louis still looked like the same energetic child they had always known. He smiled for cameras, made his family laugh, and brought a sense of warmth to even the most formal royal moments. Nothing in those brief appearances suggested that fear had entered his world. But children do not always reveal anxiety through tears. Sometimes it appears in the questions they repeat. Sometimes it hides behind sudden silence, restless sleep, or the need to know exactly where a parent is going and when they will return. At home, Louis had begun watching Catherine more carefully. When she became tired, his expression changed. When an appointment altered the family's routine, he wanted to know why. And whenever adults lowered their voices during conversations about treatment, Louis grew quiet enough to hear what no one intended him to understand. William and Catherine initially believed his laughter meant he was coping. They wanted normal routines to protect him from the seriousness surrounding the family. But a child can continue playing while carrying a fear too large to explain. Catherine noticed that Louis was no longer simply asking when she would be home. He had begun asking whether she was definitely coming back. And then, during one ordinary family moment, he asked the question that made both parents realize their silence had created a frightening answer of its own. Before cancer entered their lives, the family's days followed a rhythm Prince Louis understood. There were school mornings, shared meals, outdoor games, and the familiar sound of Catherine moving through the house. Even when royal duties changed the schedule, home still felt predictable. Then appointments began appearing. Some mornings, Catherine needed more rest. Certain plans were quietly canceled. William spent longer periods speaking with doctors and advisors, while members of the household became careful about what they said around the children. To an adult, these changes had explanations. To Louis, they were pieces of a frightening puzzle. He noticed that Catherine's energy disappeared earlier than usual. He noticed when William smiled, but still looked worried. He noticed doors closing before conversations began and voices becoming softer whenever treatment was mentioned. William and Catherine tried to preserve normality. They kept school routines steady, protected family time, and avoided burdening Louis with medical details he was too young to fully understand. They believed careful silence would make him feel safe. But silence did not remove the fear. It gave his imagination room to create answers far worse than the truth. For William, every appointment was part of a treatment plan. For Louis, every appointment meant his mother was leaving again without him knowing what would happen next. Then, during a quiet evening at home, Catherine prepared to explain another change in the family's schedule. Before she could finish, Louis looked at her and asked one simple question. The room fell completely silent. Louis did not ask whether the doctors were helping. He did not ask how long the treatment would last. He looked at Catherine and asked, "When people get cancer, do they always come home?" For a moment, neither parent answered. The question was simple, but the fear behind it was unmistakable. Louis had connected hospital visits, whispered conversations, and the word cancer with the possibility of losing his mother. Catherine felt that realization immediately. She had tried to protect him from frightening details, but he had been building his own explanation from everything the adults had left unsaid. William watched Catherine's face change. He knew they had only seconds to respond, yet an easy promise could create a deeper wound later. Telling Louis that nothing bad could ever happen might comfort him for one night, but it would not help him trust them when fear returned. William moved closer and spoke in the simplest words he could find. Catherine was receiving treatment. Her doctors were caring for her. Some days would be difficult, but Lewis would never face those days alone. Catherine then asked what had made him think she might not return. His answer revealed that this fear had been growing quietly for much longer than either parent knew. Lewis admitted that he had heard adults speaking about cancer when they believed he was not listening. He had noticed William ending phone calls whenever the children entered the room. He had seen Catherine resting after treatment and had watched his father study her face before pretending everything was normal. Lewis did not understand the medical details, but he understood fear. William felt the weight of that truth immediately. For weeks, he had tried to appear calm because he knew his children were watching him. He believed that if his voice remained steady and the family routine continued, Lewis would feel protected. But children often read what adults try hardest to hide. William now realized that every forced smile, every unfinished conversation, and every worried glance had become part of the story Lewis was silently creating. As a father, William wanted to promise that Catherine would always be safe. He wanted to remove the fear with one confident sentence. But he also knew that promises no parent could guarantee might eventually make Lewis feel even more frightened. So William chose honesty. He told his son that being afraid did not mean he was weak. It meant he loved his mother deeply. He promised that Lewis would be told what he needed to know and that no difficult day would ever be faced alone. Catherine listened quietly, but she believed Lewis needed one more thing. Not another reassurance. He needed permission to ask every question they had been too frightened to hear. Catherine had spent months trying to protect her children from the full weight of her illness. She wanted home to remain a place of laughter, schoolwork, familiar routines, and ordinary family conversations. She did not want every quiet moment to become a reminder of hospitals, treatment, or uncertainty. But Lewis's question forced her to confront a painful truth. By hiding too much, she had not removed his fear. She had left him alone with it. Catherine understood that a young child did not need complicated medical explanations. He needed words he could trust. He needed to know why she became tired, why appointments sometimes changed their plans, and why William occasionally looked worried even when he said everything was fine. Still, speaking honestly felt terrifying. As a mother, Catherine wanted to promise that she would never become seriously unwell again. She wanted to erase every frightening possibility before Lewis could imagine it. But honesty could not be built on promises no one could control. She decided that protecting him would mean giving him simple truths, repeated reassurance, and space to ask the same question more than once. Catherine would explain that treatment was helping her, that tiredness did not mean she was leaving, and that none of this had happened because of anything Lewis had said or done. She prepared to speak with him that evening. But before the conversation began, William discovered something that made the situation even more urgent. Lewis had already been searching for answers in the words, expressions, and silences of everyone around him. That evening, William and Catherine sat with Lewis in a quiet room away from staff, schedules, and royal responsibilities. They did not speak to him as a prince. They spoke to him as their youngest child. Catherine explained that she had been unwell and that doctors were giving her treatment to help her recover. She told him that treatment could sometimes make her tired, quiet, or unable to follow the family's usual routine. Then she said the words Lewis needed to hear most. None of this was his fault. Lewis looked down before asking whether he had made Catherine tired by being too loud or needing too much attention. The question struck both parents deeply because it revealed a fear they had never considered. Catherine moved closer and assured him that nothing he had done had caused her illness. William told Lewis that children sometimes blame themselves when adults are worried, but this was a burden he never needed to carry. They invited him to ask anything. Lewis admitted that he was frightened whenever Catherine left for an appointment. He worried that William's serious expression meant the doctors had shared bad news. Most of all, he feared waking up one morning and discovering that everything had changed while he was asleep. Catherine did not promise that every day would be easy. She promised that they would tell him the truth in words he could understand. William promised that no question would be ignored simply because it was difficult. For the first time, Lewis was not being protected from the conversation. He was being welcomed into it. But as relief entered the room, William and Catherine realized Lewis was not the only child who had been quietly affected. William and Catherine soon realized that each of their children had responded to the crisis differently. George understood more than Louis did. He noticed the seriousness in adult conversations and recognized that Catherine's health affected not only their family, but also the public responsibilities surrounding them. Charlotte reacted in another way. She watched closely, offered small gestures of help, and tried to keep ordinary moments feeling normal. Her calm did not mean she was unaffected. It was simply how she managed uncertainty. Louis expressed fear more directly. None of the children was stronger or weaker than the others. They were carrying the same worry in different forms. William and Catherine knew that comparing their reactions would only make them feel more isolated. Instead, they encouraged each child to speak in the way that felt natural. The family protected familiar routines whenever possible. School continued. Meals remained important. Private celebrations were kept simple, and ordinary conversations were allowed to exist beside the difficult ones. But maintaining normality brought pressure of its own. Whenever the family appeared in public, the children were expected to smile, while strangers searched their faces for clues. Every expression risked becoming a headline. William became determined that their children's emotions would not be turned into public evidence. Catherine agreed that family stability had to come before royal expectations. Yet outside their home, speculation about her recovery was growing, and even the strongest palace walls could not keep every frightening headline away from the children. As public concern about Catherine's recovery grew, so did the pressure for answers. Every canceled appearance created speculation. Every photograph was examined for signs of exhaustion. Every period of silence encouraged new theories about what the family might be hiding. For William and Catherine, the attention was no longer affecting only them. The children could hear conversations at school, notice headlines on screens, and sense when adults reacted to stories about their mother. Even when no one spoke directly to Louis, the fear could still reach him. William became increasingly protective. He understood why the public wanted reassurance, but he also knew that Louis's private emotions were not part of the monarchy's public duty. A child's fear should not become evidence for strangers to analyze. Catherine faced a difficult balance. Too much silence could allow frightening rumors to grow, but sharing too much could expose the children during one of the most vulnerable periods of their lives. Together, they chose controlled honesty. They would speak carefully about Catherine's recovery while keeping the children's private conversations inside the family. The monarchy needed continuity, but Louis needed emotional safety more than the public needed intimate details. That decision did not end the pressure. It simply drew a line around what William and Catherine believed the crown had no right to take from their children. And the real turning point did not come through another announcement. It came through one small change in the family's daily routine. The family began with something simple. Each evening, William and Catherine gave the children a clear picture of the next day. If Catherine had an appointment, Louis was told where she was going, why she needed to go, and when she expected to return. No whispered conversations. No sudden changes without explanation. The routine gave Louis something fear had taken from him: predictability. William encouraged him to ask questions whenever worry returned, even if he had asked before. Catherine reminded him that feeling frightened did not mean something terrible was happening. It meant his mind was trying to understand a difficult situation. Some days, Louis talked. Other days, he drew pictures, played quietly, or stayed close to Catherine. His parents did not force him to speak. They simply made sure he knew the door was open. Whenever her energy allowed, Catherine protected small moments, reading together, sharing a meal, walking outside, or listening to Louis describe his day. The fear did not disappear overnight, but it stopped controlling every silence. Louis began to understand that appointments had a beginning and an end. Questions could be answered. Worry could be shared. And as he slowly felt safer, William and Catherine realized their family's experience carried a message far beyond palace walls. The family's experience carried a meaning far beyond royal walls. Across the world, parents facing cancer discover that treatment affects everyone at home. Children may not understand medical language, but they notice changed routines, worried faces, and conversations that stop when they enter. Fear does not always appear through tears. It can show itself through repeated questions, difficulty sleeping, clinginess, irritability, or unusual silence. These reactions do not automatically mean something is medically wrong. They may simply be a child's way of asking for safety. William and Catherine's decision reflected a lesson many families learn under pressure. Children often cope better with simple truth than with frightening silence. They do not need every diagnosis or worst-case possibility. They need age-appropriate words. They need to know who is caring for the sick parent, what changes to expect, and who will remain beside them when routines become uncertain. Some families may need support from doctors, teachers, counselors, or child specialists. Asking for help is another form of protection. Lewis's fear connected with viewers because it was not uniquely royal. It belonged to every child who has watched a parent become ill and wondered whether life would feel normal again. In the end, the most important confirmation was not about illness. It was about what the family chose to do next. Prince Lewis's struggle did not make him weak. It revealed how deeply a child can love, how quickly uncertainty can become fear, and how important it is for families to speak honestly during illness. Catherine's cancer journey affected more than one person. It changed routines, tested confidence, and forced William and Catherine to become parents before they became public figures. They could not remove every frightening possibility, but they could make sure Lewis never carried those fears alone. William gave him reassurance. Catherine gave him honesty. Together, they gave him something stronger than silence: trust. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is knowing that fear can be spoken, shared, and faced with the people who love you most. How should parents explain serious illness to young children without increasing their fear? Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and stay with us for more royal family stories.